Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jake Irwin, and I am on the marketing team here at Benefits by Design. I'm pleased to be joined today by four great advisors who we have to make up our expert panel. On the call with us right now, we have Jay Nadler, Robert McGuire, Chad Donnelly, and Chris Gorey, who will be joining us shortly. I'll happily tell you a bit more about each of them, but I have a couple of notes just before we get started. So the first is that this webinar is being recorded. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording after the webinar. If you have any questions or concerns about this webinar, please contact us at socialmedia@bbd.ca. So for this webinar, we're going to have four main questions today, which I will direct to one advisor in turn for them to answer. After that, we'll open it up to the rest of the panelists for discussion. Now, we would ultimately love for this to be an interactive experience for our attendees. So if you'd like to jump in with a comment or question, you can either type it into the GoToWebinar question interface at any time, and I will direct it to our panel, or you can indicate that you would like to speak up to contribute, and we can unmute your microphone so that you can actively participate. We are going to try to keep each question segment to about 15 minutes for the total of the hour, but we do want to see engagement from audience members if there is an interest in doing so. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists. So today with us, we have Jay Nadler, who is an insurance guide and the owner of Naviguide Financial. He has been an insurance professional since 2002, and he lives in Comox Valley, British Columbia, and he's very active into cycling, running, kayaking, and the skiing communities. So Jay, you can give a little wave. I guess your name's there, but that's fine. We also have Chad Donnelly, who is the founder and president of Peak Benefit Solutions Incorporated, which is based in Peterborough, Ontario, and has been operating since 2008. He currently lives in the city of Kawartha Lakes with his wife and two daughters. And we have finally with us right now, Robert McGuire, who is the president of Atlantic Benefits Collaborative and is a 22-year veteran of the group insurance industry based in St. John's, New Brunswick. His firm services clients in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. And when not meeting with clients, Robert and his wife can be found at the local rink or field cheering on their teenage children. And so without further ado, our first question is going to be directed at Jay Nadler. So here goes. Jay, there's no doubt that we have all faced challenges during this crisis, and we are probably not out of the woods yet. So the question we have for you is, what challenges have you already encountered during the COVID crisis, and what challenges do you foresee over the next kind of few months?
Perfect. So I broke this into a couple of sections, but I want to start by saying I could not have done this without some great resources that helped me figure out solutions to the various challenges. I may have gotten most of this on my own, but these resources helped accelerate my knowledge. My big sources of information were my team at my partner company Nexum, the insurers, and organizations like CGIB and CFIB. I also have an informal mastermind group. It's awesome to have a group of accomplished and experienced advisors to share your ideas and questions. I highly recommend to everyone in this business to find yourself a small group of people you trust, then build yourselves a safe place to ask questions and help each other. None of us can ever know everything we need to know. So I've broken this down into easy, medium, and difficult questions or challenges. So for the easy ones, these days I rarely work from the office. I live in a rural area that ICS does not serve. I had to figure out how to receive and send courier documents. For this, I used my CFIB membership where I have access to ZoomShip, and there I get great discounts on couriers who would actually come to my home. I don't have a printer at home, so I moved to eSign wherever possible. This partially helps with the courier issue. Adobe, SignRequest, DocuSign are the ones I've used. Many of these services are free to try. If you've not already, give them a try and see which ones you feel most comfortable with. Some insurers do not accept certain documents by eSign. This list changes regularly. I've been pushing those limits wherever I can, and sometimes I even get away with it. Some PDFs are not crackable, at least not with my level of technical ability. In these cases, I do need to go to the office and print and scan, and sometimes I even need to send them out by courier. Getting used to working from home was another minor challenge, as I am easily distracted. Most of us have spouses and kids. Aside from my wife, I'm distracted by shiny objects with two wheels. Solving this issue is done by better using my calendar to keep me on task. My medium difficulty items include things like teaching clients how to use video conferencing software for the first time. By now, most of us have had at least one meeting that started with, Can you see me? I can't see you. Where are you? I can't hear you. Last week I had a webinar with someone who had done many other web meetings. This time he was on camera upside down and there was nothing we could do to figure that one out. I've tried a few video meeting platforms. These days I prefer to use Zoom. Zoom doesn't always seem to work on all computers. It seemed to be an issue on Macs for a while. I'm now testing MS Teams as an alternative, and that's going pretty well. But the most technical and challenging items included things like keeping up with all of the changing processes, opinions, and options with the different insurers. Going further, when you call the insurer, oftentimes they're still trying to figure out the issue, solution, or process, and they don't even have an answer. Understanding legal issues and possible ramifications for each decision or question a client may have. We're not lawyers, yet we're expected to understand the contracts we place, the options within, and the response to every move, change, and question a client may have. When the processes and permissions from the insurers are in a state of flux, questions for clients are not easily answered and repercussions may not be clear. If you're not already doing so, document everything and make no promises when you have no clear answers. Unique questions from clients that verge on HR are always interesting. One of my clients back in March called to discuss treating employees differently for the layoff. He wanted to keep some on the plan, and he was planning to fire some right after the layoff period. He did not want to keep those ones on the plan. This was an easy one. If they're eligible to be on the plan, they need to stay on the plan. In reality, I'm not an HR professional, nor do I even play one on TV. Even so, as professionals, we need to know the basics. We should know some advanced information, and we need to know when to tell employers they need a professional HR specialist or an employment lawyer. At least with BBD, they've got the BAP on every policy. That means some level of HR advisory is built into all of their plans. When questions are clearly above my head, that's a great tool that's available to all of our clients. I've given that number out frequently in the past few weeks. Keeping up with and understanding different options that are available to clients is another challenge. For example, is ASO a good solution for companies who cannot afford to keep paying dental premiums, but who still want to ensure that emergency dental is covered for their employees? The big issue is explaining future ramification of plan changes made today in an unknown future. For instance, canceling dental coverage was a big question when this all began. When we restart dental again, how are the premiums going to look? Originally, the consensus was that dentists would be trying to catch up on the appointments they missed. What it's looking like now is that dentists will likely return at a slower pace due to new rules. Apparently, there are hygienists who are apparently hesitant to return, and access to PPE remains difficult. This situation, of course, also depends on each province and the new rules that they are putting in place. The challenges I foresee: as more people get frustrated with the current normal, they'll have more questions. Each insurer will handle the situation differently until a new standard is reached. There will be questions about benefits that also require further HR expertise. For example, how long do I have to keep an employee on benefits, or how do I remove them if I've called them back to work and they're not returning my calls? Figuring out a new normal. What benefits will fit this new life? Does the current benefit plan design even still work? Insurers have rules about how long an employee can remain covered while on layoff. What happens for employees who remain on layoff for longer periods due to not enough available work? How will insurers respond? How will employers respond? What happens if anyone gets disabled after their layoff period ends and they have no LTD? Will employees go after employers and the insurers? We need to make sure our clients know how to let their employees know their options for coverage at the end of the benefit coverage period. How will insurers deal with new PPE costs or increases in customary and reasonable fees due to new, more expensive protocols? Quebec Finance recently ruled that PPE fees can be paid by insurer. CRA is saying PPE will not be coverable. So far, I've heard Empire will do this, but only in Quebec. So how will this change affect renewals? My guess is that even if CRA changes their mind, PPE costs will not be covered by most insurers. Plan users and practitioners will figure that out. I think the inevitable result is that PPE costs will get rolled into customary and reasonable fees. For example, a massage and physiotherapist will add $10 or $20 to their average bill with the PPE costs embedded and hidden in that total charge. As such, we're likely to see a greater increase in trend factors in future years to compensate. As the PPE use slowly disappears, we will likely not see a rollback in those customary and reasonable fees. All of these items will push plan costs. The past decade has seen an increase in the incidence of insurers referring to some paramedics, like massage therapy, as non-essential benefits. I think this conversation will become a bigger topic as people try to figure out how to control or reduce costs. I think the reality, this is my personal opinion, is that paramedics help keep people off meds and decrease the incidence of absenteeism. As such, the issue will become how do we keep these things that keep employees happy, yet control costs during and following a pandemic and recession. Ultimately, I hope CRA allows us to claim PPE and that our insurers will give the choice to our clients. For example, at renewal, we simply get to ask the question, do you want PPE to be covered? We let them know how much that'll push their premiums. If the answer is yes, we amend their contract to allow the insurers to pay that item. I personally don't want to see it as an automatic addition with no choice given. Since, as I said above, the practitioners who need PPE will likely embed the cost into their fees, the other option I would like to see is to have a choice of fee guides for paramed and dental services. For example, perhaps they can offer a fee guide that accounts for pre and post-COVID. That's it for
Awesome.
me.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jay. So that was a lot of information, a lot of unpack. Before we turn to our other panelists, Robert and Chad, I'm going to actually introduce Lindsay Gibson, one of our regional directors at Benefits by Design, who has solved the technical issues that had prevented her from hosting the webinar previously. So I am going to disappear now, and Lindsay is going to be taking over. You guys are in very good hands. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thanks, Jake. Sorry about that, everybody. That's great, Jay. I did get to hear a little bit about it that you had to say. Chad, do you have anything you want to add, or Rob?
I do. I'll just wait till my question, though, Lindsay.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Rob, did you want to add anything to this question?
Yeah, it's interesting that Jay mentioned about the challenge of embracing technology. I know for me, servicing clients in 3 different provinces, it's not like downtown Toronto. Logistics are pretty significant. And one of the longer term plans we had was working to incorporate that virtual atmosphere into our practice. And so I think this pandemic has forced not only us as advisors, but our clients sort of down the rabbit hole of being more accepting to that online world. And it certainly has allowed us to move part of our strategic plan forward in implementing that and making it easier for us, not only from a sales perspective, but from a service perspective for our clients as well. Another thing I wanted to add too that I think is going to be a challenge coming up is on the renewal side. I think that from a current perspective, renewals have been dealt with fairly satisfactorily. Obviously, some of them bumped off, and they don't have, a lot of them don't have the pricing built in for any premium changes that happened in the last little while. But I think over the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see some pretty significant issues. One thing that I can think of off the top of my head is things like coordination of benefits, especially in the smaller end of the market. If you've got a lot of small businesses that aren't reopening, I think you're going to see a lot of plans that are going to face a bit of a spike in dependent health and life claims because now there's no coordination offset. And so some of these smaller plans are going to have to start absorbing some of those costs. And I think that's going to be a pretty significant challenge on the smaller end of the scale.
For sure. Chris, hi, welcome.
I apologize, everyone. It took me, I've been trying to connect since about 12:35. So 40 minutes and here I am. Didn't have a chance to put on a button down, so I apologize for that, but I am here. The technology, God love it. So
that's all that matters. I had technology glitches as well. Perfect. Well, thank you to Jay and Rob for jumping in and answering that question. We'll now move on to the second question, which will be directed
to— one thing to that, Lindsay?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes, please.
Great. And I apologize if Jay or Robert actually covered this, but the one thing I actually am concerned about with the challenges are going to be the dental. What's going to happen with dental premiums? Did you guys touch on this at all before I joined?
Yeah, I talked about increases in PPE fees and additional costs.
And also the frequency in which you're actually going to be able to take people in, because the cleaning is going to be approximately 2 hours between each session, right? So they're going to be looking at a huge decrease because of that. So if you've covered that, then I will shut up.
Absolutely. I think what you're getting at, Chris, is what some dental associations are saying is that you can't have people stacked, one person then put another person into that room within 5 minutes. Some associations are saying that there needs to be 2 to 3 hours between people per room. which may actually increase the cost of a dental visit substantially because each room is not being used for 2 to 3 hours at a time.
Exactly.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That's great. We're going to take this or move the second question on to Chris. Chris, during a crisis, our strengths shine and our weaknesses become more apparent. For example, at BBD, we recognized that one of our strengths was our ability to move quickly to a fully remote workforce with little to no effect on our customers. A weakness that we identified was that we still rely heavily on mail being sent to and from our offices for things like ID cards, enrollments, claims, etc. What strengths, weaknesses, or both did you learn about yourself and your business during this period?
This has been a really eye-opening thing for me personally. I've always, for those of you who I don't know, I'm a big user of tech. I love speaking about benefits and technology, and I've had the opportunity to do so across Canada on several occasions. And I'm always one to actually hop on board a tech platform. And one of the things that I realized was a weakness of mine is that I was hopping on these benefit platforms so quickly, Dropbox being one example, that I wasn't actually using all the different features that are available in it, and I wasn't really setting it up properly. So I think that I'm seeing personally a lot of more reoccurrences of people trying to hack into accounts, Salesforce, Dropbox, what have you. So I've taken the time during this to actually go through and look at all the features of all the different things I'm using, Salesforce, Evernote, Dropbox, set it up more securely through 2-layer authentication. Also for accounting platforms that I've been using, such as Xero and Receipt Bank. I have not actually secured those properly. So I think I'm so quick to actually embrace. I wasn't thinking fully about all the ramifications associated with it. So I've really had a big opportunity to go back and set things up properly and proper integrations. The other thing for me personally, not just professionally, but personally, is I found this to be, I've actually, this is kind of a tough one. This has been a criticism of myself. I found this to be, as a person who just lives on his own in a condo, an opportunity where I can go all in and work 14 hours a day. And I found the COVID has brought out the worst in me, to be completely truthful with you. It has brought out the workaholic in me. So a 14-hour workday, 15-hour workday has been very, very common. And I've really struggled with that work-life balance. So one of the things I did was I stupidly, well, maybe not stupidly, but I went and got a pandemic puppy. So that actually forced me to actually get away from the office and balance work life a little bit more. Get away from starting at 8 o'clock in the morning and working till 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night. Because as we know, the COVID bulletins and COVID changes are coming in fast and furious, especially in April, May, and April and May. Now this has forced me to step back a little bit. I'm not saying everyone should go out and get a puppy, but I'm saying watch that work-life balance because it can be very, very unhealthy. You know, I was literally sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, wrapping up work 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, having a hard time unwinding until 2 o'clock in the morning and getting up again 7 o'clock in the morning, doing it all over again, day after day. So if anyone's really struggling with this, just take a look internally at what you're doing. Track your hours, force yourself to get up, whether it be through some of the apps like Calm and some of the other ones that force you to get up every couple hours and just walk away from your computer. A puppy like I did, whatever the case is. That has been a huge, huge weakness of mine, which which has come to realization during all this.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. What's the pandemic puppy's name?
Hallie.
Oh, cute.
And again, just going back to the technology thing, the other thing I've done is I've taken platforms like Dropbox and I have actually better organized all my documents. I had everything all just lumped together in Dropbox. I've actually taken the time, like I said, set things up properly with proper authentications and put everything in there from commission statements going back to 10 years, booklets, contracts, reasonable and customary documents. Everything is now within Dropbox. So I'm completely virtual. I can be working from wherever, and now I can actually find everything within 30 seconds. Before it was a little bit of a challenge, but now that I've taken a deeper dive into some of the platforms I've been using, data is available within 30 seconds, if that.
Awesome. I'm getting asked a question, Chris. Is the puppy close to you? People that are attending would like to see her.
I'll tell you what, yes, I will get the puppy before the end of this webinar. She's a 3.5-month-old golden doodle. So yes, I will bring Hallie onto the webinar.
Perfect. Great. Jay, did you want to add anything to this question?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about some of the negatives that came from COVID. There's some great positives that have come from COVID. There's the puppy. The reality is my infrastructure works, my electronic processes work. I live in a rural area. Most of my clients probably my average client is probably at least 400 or 500 kilometers away. And so the reality is now my infrastructure has been proven and I can work from anywhere, which is awesome because, we all dream about spending winters in warmer climates. Maybe one day after all this is over, I'll actually be able to do that. The other interesting bonus that came from all of this is that now most of my meetings, not all, but most of my meetings are done this way. And there's a little record button. Therefore, for compliance, if I'm giving advice, I get permission from my clients to record, and it's in our shared file. And if anything ever comes back, we can go right back to the original recording. It's been fabulous.
That's awesome.
Lindsay, can I just take one idea that I mentioned a little bit further? Sorry. The whole thing, in the last 2 weeks, the apps that I've been using people have been trying to hack in quite regularly. And I mentioned the 2-layer authentication. All the applications, whether it be Salesforce, whether it be Dropbox, you can use applications like Google Authenticator to actually, before you can go on, you can actually get the code off your phone and only you're going to go in. I probably have had about 5 to 10 hack attempts in the last 2 weeks. So really take the time to go in and set up your applications properly.
Wow, that's a lot. Scary. Just to let you know, Chris, advisors are commenting in the question pane that a lot of people are totally agreeing with your comments on the work-life balance and it being kind of non-existent during COVID. So
it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle. Again, for complete transparency, I actually my wife and I actually just separated in January. So, COVID hit and the separation hit, and it has been a big struggle. So I'm not sure if anyone else is going through something similar. I just wanted to share that in case somebody else in the group is actually going through something similar. Just hang in there. It will get better.
True story. There's a question from an advisor that is in attendance. Have any of you reevaluated your business's blocks with agility that has been built through technology?
In what way? I'm not sure I understand that, Lindsay.
No, you know what? I'm not sure I understand that either. So for whoever did enter that question in the question interface, if you could just go a little bit deeper for us so we can that out to the panel.
I just want to add to one of Chris's comments, the work life, totally agree. The first few weeks was brutal for me. I heard about all these people painting every room in their house and doing all these, and I had no energy for any of it. I just felt a little lost. But on the technology side, Chris, we were the same. We were pretty far along technology wise. What I've struggled with and just have had to adopt to is the fact that a lot of my clients aren't at the same level. So I have expectations of how it's going to go, and they don't even want to do a webinar. They just want to do a phone call, or they just want me to email renewals now sometimes. And you lose a lot of the contact, and you risk losing conveying the information properly, which goes back to Jay's comment about compliance and advice. So it's created efficiencies with meetings being quicker in a lot of cases and really effective, but the ones that don't want to embrace the technology, you do risk losing the advice portion and bringing that value. So there's some quick meetings, but I'm not sure it's a good thing.
That's interesting. In our industry, everybody talks about setting up your A, B, and C clients. Maybe a new topic that we need to think about is do we go forward working with clients who aren't willing to work at our level of processes based on whatever technology we're implementing?
I think going forward, that's going to be less of an issue because that I personally, I'm going to stereotype, I generally find with an older demographic. Shift to a younger demographic, younger decision makers, they're going to be there to meet you on Google Hangouts or Zoom or whatever the case is. So I've taken on construction companies where the CFO is 25, software development companies where they're 19 and 21, and they're very quick to adapt. So I don't think, it depends on your demographic, truthfully.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just to pop in really quick, guys, from the same person that was asking about the good instinct, it says, do you find an increase in the value of your business as a result of incorporating technology? The improved compliance of electronic records notes would likely lead to increase in valuation. What are your thoughts? And I'll throw that out to any of you.
I think, okay. Go ahead, Jay.
That's absolutely. I've already, this is my second brokerage that I own. I owned another one before this in Alberta that my team took over when I moved to Vancouver Island. And the reality is that I think that brokerage was well valued because I did have a high level of technology. Pretty much everything was electronic. We had easy access to files and client information. Everything was super organized. So the more organized, the more like a business that you look like, the easier it is to get information when you are going through the sales process. The easier it is for other people to do their due diligence on what you're actually presenting to them.
I think it's important too, if I could just chime in, that, like Chris had said with Salesforce or whatever sort of client management software system that you're using, it's to get that information into the system, but learning how to use that system to the best of its ability. Chris had mentioned about being the early adopter and not following through on stuff, and I'm guilty of that even in my own client management software. I've got everything digitized and all the files there, but it's probably not providing me with half of the capability that it's capable of doing, just because I don't know how to use the software to its full extent and exploit it as much as I can. So I think that that's an important part as well. But just having all of that stuff digitized and having quick access to the information is certainly something that makes our job easier when we're meeting with our clients, but it also makes it easier, I think, to the question that when it comes time to transition that block of business or that client down the road, having concise and clear access to information is going to be key.
And let me take that one step further, Robert, because that's a great point. With all the platforms, with a lot of the CRMs, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of the CRMs, they can be customized. And in the case of Salesforce, which is what I use, you can find people on different sites like Fiverr or Upwork who can actually do customization for you for next to nothing. So Jay and I actually had a call a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this. And what I did was I actually customized Salesforce. I found on Fiverr a guy who customized it and put on everything, TLRs, IBNRs, and we built in calculations. So we actually were able to put on number of sons and families, the health rate, the dental rate, LTD, short-term life, AD&D rates. So I was able to do calculations on the fly. So I don't have any more manual calculations. So it updates it automatically. And then I can pull reports in Salesforce based on the carrier, like my block of business with Sun, my block of business with Manu, my block of business with BBD, of course, and actually shows everything. And so it's just, once you get that set up, it's just a matter of updating the rates when you do a change or renewal, and you can have an instantaneous report on the size of your block. And again, going back to what you said, Lindsay, about acquisitions, yeah, you can give an accurate count to any potential purchaser as to what your exact block of business is. Conversely, you're sitting in front of a client, you can say exactly what your single rate, your health rate is going to be for everything. I did all that for $400. So it's not a huge cost to get that done.
Oh, perfect. Well, before we move on to the next question, I do want to introduce Chris Gorey, because I'm not sure if he was introduced at the very beginning because both of us had technical difficulties, but really quickly, Chris Gorey is the founder of Orchard Benefits, formerly Insurance Portfolio Financial Services. Chris has been in the insurance industry since 1995. Yep, that long. and focuses exclusively on employee benefits for tech companies. So if he was already introduced, I apologize, but then you got to hear it twice. Okay, now on to the third question. Oh, just one, there's actually a question. It says, how do you spell that service, Chris?
So there's two that you can look at. Fiverr is Fiverr, and the other one is Upwork, Upwork. I used Fiverr for the person who did the customization for me. There's a guy out of India who did it, and really satisfied with the work.
Would you be able to forward me any information you have or contact person after the webinar for that?
Yeah, what I'll do, Lindsay, is I'll send you off screenshots of how I've set it up, so you can actually see all the fields I've put in there,
Okay.
and also give you the contact information for the guy in Fiverr.
Perfect. I would really appreciate that. Thanks, Chris. All right, so we're going to move on to the third question. This one will be for Chad Donnelly. Chad, there's no doubt that this crisis has changed your business in some way. I know it has for BBD for sure. We've certainly adapted to a more virtual communication model, both internally and externally. We also uncovered several efficiencies in our processes. How will you conduct your business differently as we move into the next normal?
Yeah, so Jay covered off a lot of the points I was going to cover, and just want to touch on a few of them right away. Zoom and obviously virtual, e-sign costs. I think it's wonderful that our industry is being forced into some of those things, e-sign and not needing original documents. But for us, we're always just asking the question, how are we going to show value to our clients? And that's really for us the biggest challenge in what we're looking at. Renewals, reviews, benchmarking, communicating, those things haven't changed in the content. I think it's now the delivery that we're going to have to keep evaluating and reevaluating. The first few weeks, it was so reactive. It was all about answering questions and trying to get as much information out as quickly as possible. And at the risk of sending out too much and people ignoring you. So what we have to do differently, we're sending out more electronically than we did previously. We were doing a lot more communication in person. And so that's changing. One of the biggest things, we spend a lot of time on employee communication. And when I say we, I mean staff that do a much better job of it than I do. So we've pivoted to away from in-person meetings for the short term, at least, hopefully not the long term, but the employee communication either via webinar, and we've started doing recorded employee meetings, and the reception has been really, really positive. That's been one of the things that we found we probably should have been doing earlier, because now people can get it to all the employees, and there's ways to ensure that everyone sees it or has the opportunity to see them. That's been a big one early on. One of our strengths was our client event, and BBD was thankfully a sponsor, shout out. That's going to possibly change. It was canceled, it was scheduled for April, and we may have to do that via webinar now. And that's fine, but I worry that it's not going to have the same value to our clients, because when we did surveys, one of the biggest things they responded to was the opportunity for networking in between sessions. So again, we just have to keep reevaluating everything we do and find out if it's giving the same value. So I have concerns about all of that. We've found a lot of efficiencies. Attendance for a meeting like this, you wouldn't be able to get all the people from all the different areas, so that's a benefit to us. But there's definitely concerns. Change in our office space and layout. We did have an office that we were very proud of, and I just started coming back in the last few weeks. We were already working virtually, but it's probably going to be more heavily virtual than in office, and that's creating challenges that we didn't anticipate. But we can work around it because we were already working mainly paperless. I just worry about, as Chris alluded to, long-term employees of ours, all of us being lonely and disconnected, because you do get a certain energy coming into the office. Maybe that will change, but I've noticed it, significant change, at least early on. You'll lose the appreciation of working from home because it becomes the normal. But again, Jay did a really good job. The one thing I want to touch on, the biggest change that I'm looking at is actually a new business. And how do you get new business going forward? And when you do acquire a new client or you start working with a prospect, how do you build that trust and the relationship early on? Because I know with my existing clients, a lot of them, it's been great. Meetings are efficient, there's no travel time, but we're trying to grow. We have a number of advisors who have had success finding business, old school, knocking on doors, making calls, and networking. But all of those, that's changed, at least for the short term. You can't go to an event, shake hands with people, sit down, have lunch. So the mass networking is gone, at least in person. And the in-person meeting with a lot of people, new people, is gone. So we have to find new ways to build those relationships. You can't stand in a retail store, for example, waiting to introduce yourself because you're taking up a spot if they're only allowed 5 clients. You can't stand there. They're going to resent that. So I don't know the answer to that. That's our biggest challenge. There are now quickly popping up virtual networks and associations, but I'm curious. Alignable is a new one, at least in this area, or Aligned, sorry, that's popping up, and I'm trying it, but with limited success. So I think we can all rely on our existing networks. We're going to have to get creative or more creative in asking for referrals and getting referrals from our existing clients. But as far as our existing networks and networking, when that dries up, if things don't change, we're all going to have to make significant changes, at least here, for growing. And just to touch on acquiring business or selling business, which we've done in the last few years, acquiring blocks, how do you build that relationship early on with the block you've acquired? Because you want to build trust very quickly and show value. We can show value virtually and electronically, but it's just not the same. And I do wonder how that's going to change. So fingers crossed that things improve and we can embrace the positives of all the technology. But if things don't change, I worry about our industry changing as far as building relationships and the in-person touches. So
that's very true. All very good and relevant points, Chad. Does anybody else on the panel want to add anything to what's going to be different as we move into the next normal? No.
I do, but it looks like Jay wants to, I do, but I think Jay, you want to say something first.
You
I think Robert
wants.
Well, so one thing that Chad, you mentioned that, how we're actually going to be reaching out to clients and prospects. One of the things I did was an idea that I actually borrowed from Jay. And Jay had actually held a town hall meeting for his clients, and he had an agenda that he shared with me. So I then held a town hall meeting, and I put together a COVID-19 spreadsheet, which I've shared with everybody in the industry, that has all the company's bulletins on there. I have to update it every day. So I shared that as the first part of the meeting. We went through telehealth, but then I brought on outside speakers, and we actually mentioned this to Jay over the weekend that I have another one scheduled for next Monday. And so again, it's going to be an update about COVID-19 and benefits. But then I bring on these management consultants to actually talk about, and their clients to talk about what the return to work is going to look like. Last time I had 25 or 30 people on there, and I only organized it about a week out. And this time we're going to be much more structured, and it was for clients and prospects. So I think that's going to be, we can bring in experts to talk about different things. I think some people have been talking about have brought in, physio and some other virtual massage providers to actually as part of their town hall meetings, if you would. So there's just different ways we can position it with their clients by partnering and aligning with third-party experts in different industries that kind of relate into the benefit space.
And building on what Chris was saying, because I'm working on the exact same thing, using Zoom to run my town halls, what I actually did was went to my clients to find out the topics that they were interested in. So I gave them a choice of 5 different things, asked them to rate it, but I also asked them to input theirs. And the reality is, if they're asking the questions, other businesses are out there asking the questions. So going back to your question, Chad, about how do you find new clients? Well, in our blocks, most of us should have tons and tons of contact information for people that we've spoken to over the last years, however long you've been in the business. It's a great opportunity to reach out to those people and say, hey, I'm offering this. Would you like to be on this session as well? And start showing that you are doing things that are different from your clients. The other thing that really also has, I think, helped the communication is the recording of these meetings. And when I'm talking specifically about our employee education sessions and payroll administrator education sessions, where, again, record the video, share the video for employees. Every single new employee that comes on now gets the video, and highly recommend share it with spouse as well. And therefore, the education level is through the roof, and the questions to the administrator decrease. So great new efficiencies that we've been able to find with these systems.
Just to build on what I think everybody has said, when it comes to those sorts of issues, I noticed even in my own practice that one of the weaknesses I had was having that comprehensive communication strategy, and how do we get that information that's pertinent and timely out to clients. We relied pretty heavily on an internal newsletter. That certainly wasn't enough, but it was good to start to get information out. Clients wanted to know things like premium credits, that sort of stuff. We realized pretty quickly that our external communication strategy was pretty lacking. And to Jay and Chris's point about the town hall thing, I really like the concept, and I think that that's something that I could incorporate. I actually went a different route where we wanted to Chad's comments, sort of show value and perhaps put it out there that there's a sales, I won't say it's a sales ask, but there's a sales component to it. And so we actually conducted a pilot program of live video, which was all done on Facebook, but it was through a third-party software called Be Live. Where every one of those sessions was recorded, so we could then in turn share that on other platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram and some of those other areas. And so that was one of the things that we did, was to try to create that video series, or at least do the pilot. So now we've got a good understanding of what people are looking for. And to your point, Jay, we're now pulling together a series of posts that are going to happen of these videos that are very focused on those topics that are most relevant to our plan sponsors and our plan members. And it's going to be something that we can tie to social media posts on all the different platforms, and also be able to use as tidbits or clips in our client newsletter as well. So there's a focused message, and everybody gets the same information at the same time, and it makes it easier for us to follow up to, because everybody's looking at the same information. It doesn't matter what the channel is that they're getting it from. So I think that that's some great insight from everybody, and how we can add value to our clients.
For sure, I totally agree, Robert. Now we're going to move on to the 4th question, and that will be directed at yourself. So, Rob, to our surprise, we've seen plan amendments that include enhancements to existing plans versus the removal of benefits. There was a Benefits Canada article recently highlighting this. What has your experience been, and what does the future benefit plan look like?
It's a good question, and I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I don't know that I have all the answers, but I've got some good information. At the outset of this COVID-19 pandemic, many of our small business clients weren't sure if their business would remain open. And then as the weeks continued, many weren't sure that their doors would ever open again. And so there was a lot of stress there. And we had a number of clients that were looking to suspend coverage or looking for ways that they could pass costs onto their staff during layoff. But I want to emphasize that was a pretty small subset of our block, which thankfully was a good thing. For many of our clients, it was business as usual. In the early weeks, we had several clients that were looking to make changes to actually support their employees, which is not something that I expected. Part of our collaborative approach, and if I can tagline the Atlantic Benefits collaborative name, but part of our collaborative approach resulted in the development of a webinar that we rolled out to any small business, but it was targeted at our existing clients, where we leveraged the resources that we needed to help small businesses who were uncertain about how they could support their remote employees. So our strategic partnerships allowed us to provide complimentary access to a certified human resource specialist to help clients develop things like a work from home policy and work through issues related to hiring and even onboarding in a remote environment. Business owners also realized that they still had a responsibility to the health and wellness of their employees, even if they're working at home. And most of them were now working from home, either at a kitchen table or they were hunched over on their couch. So we facilitated access to a certified ergonomist who conducted complimentary virtual assessments to help ensure that their home workspaces were safe for the employees. This particular individual provided a guide to facilitate the proper setup of at-home workstations and even worked with clients who had to rearrange their offices or frontline setup to ensure the health and wellness of their staff. We brought in an RMT and wellness coach to help our clients who may have been having trouble adjusting to the sedentary and home lifestyle associated with self-isolation and social distancing protocols. She conducted physical and postural assessments and provided remedial exercises to help with some of the chronic and repetitive injuries that members were facing in that new work environment. Many plan members realized that access to primary care was also something that was quickly becoming an issue. Access to your family doctor was restricted. Emergency room visits were, unless it was an acute case, you weren't getting in. Walk-in clinics were closed. And although we've been promoting things like virtual healthcare for the last few years, the current environment underscored the significant need for access to the healthcare network. The point was really driven home with that announcement from Shoppers when they partnered with Maple to provide interim access to the majority of Canadians who didn't have access to a physician. Many of the group insurance companies had limited or restricted versions of virtual healthcare. We saw a need for more robust offerings, so we actually took the opportunity to develop strategic partnerships with 3 virtual healthcare providers to offer a more robust package. And I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country, but Atlantic Canada seems to lag a little bit, and virtual healthcare isn't something that's predominant in discussion. And so having that discussion with clients and trying to make them understand that, up to this point, it was a discussion of, we don't have a lot of family physicians here. This is how you can add value to your employees, to all of a sudden, every employer saw the value in their employees having access to a healthcare professional. So for us, some of the results of these initiatives meant that we saw more clients implementing virtual healthcare products. More of our clients were reviewing their EAP offerings to ensure they offered more comprehensive plans than just the basic ones. We had several clients implementing HSAs and in particular wellness spending accounts, more so to facilitate streamlined access to things like the ergonomist, which typically isn't covered in a standard package. We're also seeing clients open up to the idea of on-site workplace massage as part of an overall wellness plan. So these were some of the changes and enhancements that we saw in our own practice, but I think as we move through this phase of the pandemic and we start to get back to a new normal, that there will be certainly more changes and enhancements from a plan design perspective as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Does Chris or Jay or Chad want to add to this? Jay?
I'm just thinking about, Robert covered so many things. I'm so happy that you had that question, Robert, because some really great ideas in there. Really, in my world, it hasn't been as thorough as yours, but what I can say is just clients, most of my clients stayed the same. Some pulled back a couple of things, but some, when I went back and reviewed the idea of the EAP with them, they really liked that. I always talk about ASO with larger clients. They suddenly understood it. So that was the type of thing that was changing on our side.
I would just add, like, the ergonomist, that's amazing. And that's just a great example of how we have to look at everything differently now with people. Again, good on you, because that's it's a great idea. And it's just something that wouldn't have really been important in January or February. Like, that's how much it's changed. So just taking it, looking at it from a very different angle is what we have to do now, daily and probably weekly.
I think
I
if
think
I
you guys
could
have
also
covered.
just add to that, part of
Go ahead, Rob.
how I viewed it is that we've always been at that the center of a much broader professional network, and that's where our value is, with those relationships with other providers and practitioners that add value to our client. And those types, that the ergonomist and the human resources specialist, I mean, those are practitioners or practices that really align with what we're doing and adding value to our client. And a lot of times our clients are already accessing those services independently. So part of our approach was to sort of bring it under one umbrella and say, look, we know you're going through a lot at this point. Everything's sort of coming at you fast and furious. So here's a way where we can take some of the stress off by providing you this information or the tools and resources. And we were very fortunate. Our partners, our strategic partners that came on, offered those services complimentary or at extremely discounted prices to help ensure that clients of any size could access those tools and resources.
I just wanted to add a couple things. And Rob, what you said was so all-encompassing. You covered everything, so many bases there. So well done. What I'm just noticing is more of a focus on the employee mental health. Again, going back to the work-life balance, there was an article about here in Toronto, a lot of businesses are looking at shifting from the downtown core and taking their headquarters out to the suburbs, for a lower cost when people do return to work, but also because it's going to be closer to where their staff live. So there's a renewed interest in that work-life balance. And what I've seen, and I'll be completely transparent, I've seen more EAPs be implemented since the beginning of COVID than I have in the last 2 years combined. I worked with pre-COVID probably about 100 groups. A couple dropped off, a couple tech startups dropped off because of COVID. They shut down. But I think since the beginning of COVID, I've implemented eight EAPs, some through carriers like BBD, some independent. And then other companies, other clients have actually taken what they like to deem their mental health paramedics and put them in a separate bucket. So they're just saying, okay, you've got X number of dollars for your physio, for your massage, but what about the mental health side of it? We want to actually give you money that's not going to come out of that other bucket. So I've actually seen several do that, take that approach to it. Like, hey, you want money for psychology, for psychotherapy, what have you, here's a separate pool for that. So yeah, that's quite common. And again, what you said, Rob, as well about HSAs, I've seen quite a few of those as well.
Great. So we're getting close to 2 p.m., but we're getting a couple more questions. Would you all be okay if we went over by a couple minutes so we could answer them? Good.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. The first
I was
one,
late, at least I get to stick around.
Thanks, Chris. Okay. So the first question is, has anyone started facing what the new reality looks like for returning employees? How to respect social distancing, but still encourage a team atmosphere?
I work on my own. My team's all in Montreal, so I can't really respond to that one.
Okay.
So we've started discussions about returning employees, right? We probably aren't in a rush. Chris Salasco's in the office today with me, and he'd be laughing because I had an issue today doing a task that I wouldn't normally do, and it didn't go well. So we are either going to have to find a timeline and stagger staff coming in at different days of the week to try and cover off some of the things, or we're going to have to find a way to eliminate some of the tasks that have to be done here. I don't have the answer, but I do know it's going to be a big challenge because if you have staff with children, how do you tell them they have to come in a specific day? So there's going to have to be a lot of accommodation, and that's what we're going through right now. But the solution, like I said, you may just have to find ways to eliminate some of the tasks that had to be done in the office previously. So we're just starting to address it now, to be honest, because it wasn't urgent. But as business picks up and we get back to more simple day-to-day tasks, we either have to eliminate them or find a schedule.
Right. And for those attending too, BBD just did a blog post. It's called "Is Your Workplace Ready to Return to Work?" And there's tons of great information there and links and articles on how to do it and what other people are going through and what have you. Thanks for that, Chad. We have a couple more questions. So one question is, how has your prospecting methods changed since COVID? I'm gonna let any of you take that.
I think I'll just jump in there, but for us, our practice, we really tried to get away from the door knocking, cold knocking, calling years ago, and really focused on as much from a referral perspective as possible. And that really comes with strengthening that relationship. And I think, from my perspective, one of the ways that we strengthen that, and I think is going to pay dividends for us, is that we were out of the gate contacting employees. I know a lot of advisors were scared to call their clients because they were concerned that as soon as their client picked up the phone, they would be saying, "Oh, geez, I'm glad you called me. I was going to call you because I want to cancel my benefit plan." And I think too many advisors, especially smaller advisors, were scared of that. I think you had to show your value and you had to be there to handhold through this entire process and answer even the most mundane question for those individuals. And I think that is one of the big reasons why that will come back in spades when all of a sudden in the small business community, all these small business owners are talking, whether it's at a networking event, and somebody is going to be saying, "Oh, I never heard from my advisor during this whole time or this process." And we actually had one instance of that just last week where, a business in town was expressing displeasure with their advisor, with one of their colleagues who they just happen to own franchises. And, our name came up because we were in contact with them constantly, making sure that they had all the tools and information that they needed. And I think that that's one of the big things. Obviously, everybody's going the route online of videos and Facebook and Instagram and all that sort of stuff. I don't know why I'm on Instagram. It's all pictures. So unlike Chris, I can't post pictures of my dog, but those are all certainly ways that we'll be able to drive business. It's how you add value to those different methodologies. It's key.
I've actually had some success pre-COVID and actually during COVID with LinkedIn marketing campaigns. So as Lindsay mentioned, I work exclusively with tech startups. So again, complete transparency, about 100 companies, about 85 to 90% of them would be tech startups, from small ones up to larger ones. And I've previously run some specific LinkedIn campaigns for, you can get very, very detailed. So I ran some for just companies in New York, Boston, and California that were tech companies about, if they're looking to expand into Canada, and that turned into business. One brief little campaign that cost me about 150 bucks, I turned into 3 clients. Recently, I ran one, I actually just ran it last month, so I'm still seeing the results of it, but I had about 6 leads come out of that. So you can get very, very detailed in who your criteria as to who you're going to be marketing to. And the key thing is to come up with a landing page. So the LinkedIn campaign can talk about what you do, and it can have a link to a page on your site, or you can come up with just a dedicated landing page that might have an infographic or an ebook or what have you. And we've had a lot of success with that. So you can do that for next to nothing. The company that threw the page together for me, a couple $100 bucks, and I have a company that handles my social media, and I think that campaign, including the ad cost, was about 320 bucks.
Thanks, Chris.
If I may?
Yes, of course.
One of the things I found is that right now with people working from home, especially when you're dealing with small business owners, that there is no receptionist / gatekeeper person. A lot of times, if you call the business phone number, the owner answers the phone. And the reality is, yeah, COVID is creating all these new problems in the world, but they still want to have benefits and they want to appreciate their employees and they still have questions about health and dental and what's changing. And with a lot of, I'll say, our peers not calling their clients right now, it's a great opportunity to just pick up the phone and let people know that you are open for business and still there to help.
Really good input, Jay. Perfect. Thank you all. There's just one last question, I promise. And this one is thoughts on LTD rates going up due to expected claims, likely many mental health ones.
It's inevitable. I think everything's going to be going up. Health, dental, LTD. Ironically, I just had an email on Friday from the plan administrator of a client who's 120 employees. And the plan administrator was actually just got back from mental health leave. Now she's leaving the company. So it's affecting everyone, not just the staff, even people in management positions. So absolutely, we're going to see rates increase as a result.
Right,
And I
across
think
the
it's
board.
going to come fast too. I think you're going to see so many at once. It's going to take a while for the industry to catch up rate wise and treating them. I think it's going to be scary.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, that's the end of our questions, and we didn't go that much over, which is excellent. It's only 2:04. I'd like to say a great big thank you to all of you for participating, sharing your experiences and insights in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd also like to thank all of the attendees, the advisors that submitted questions to us and participated in the discussion. As a reminder, we did record this webinar and it will be sent to you in a follow-up email. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Bye. Have a good day, guys.